All right. Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Katie Monahan, and I'm a communications strategist here at the Ohio Arts Council, and I am pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, OAC Grants Are Open, What You Need to Know About This Cycle's Guidelines and ARTIE Changes. So I know everyone is eager to get started, and we have a lot of information to cover during our hour together today, but before I introduce our presenters, there are, of course, just a few housekeeping items to go over. So first, live captioning is available for today's webinar, and you can access those captions by clicking on the closed captioning icon there in your control panel. Next, everyone tuning in today is in listen-only mode, but if you do have a question at any point, go ahead and type it into the Q&A box there in your control panel. Justin Nigro, the OAC's Operations and Public Affairs Director, is here with me behind the scenes, helping to monitor those questions as they come in, and we'll gather those up, and then Justin is going to facilitate a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So we'll be sure to answer all of your questions there, and again, please be sure to use the Q&A function and not the chat. It's easier to track questions that way, and we don't want to miss anybody. Also, if you have audio issues or trouble connecting, we recommend refreshing your browser. And if that doesn't work, try logging off and logging back in. And also, please keep in mind that because we are presenting from different locations, there may be some variations in bandwidth or internet stability. So if the sound fluctuates or one of us freezes up for a minute, thanks in advance for bearing with us. I promise you we'll keep on rolling through any of those little tech glitches. And finally, we are recording today's webinar, and that recording will be available on our webinars page at oac.ohio.gov/webinars and on our YouTube channel by early next week. And everyone who registered for today's webinar will also receive a follow-up email containing a link to that recording and a link to the slide deck. All right, that is it for housekeeping. Now I'm excited to welcome today's presenters, my colleagues, Dan Katona, the Deputy Director here at the OAC, and Brianna Dance, our Organizational Programs Coordinator. So Dan, Brianna, thanks for being here. Let's hear all about those guidelines and ARTIE changes.
Thanks so much, Katie. Thanks for the introduction. And hey, Brianna, thanks for being with us today. Welcome, welcome.
Hello, Dan.
It's so great to have a good group of folks with us. We're excited to finally be at this point. The start of a new grant season is always exciting, and this year is especially exciting because we've made some important changes, and we're glad that you're all with us to hear some more about them. Yes, lots to get to, so we don't want to waste too much time. Indeed, I'm the Deputy Director here at the agency, and on behalf of myself and the team, I want to welcome you. It was a big team effort to make these updates this year, and here's our agenda today to take you through some of those bits and pieces. A little background to get us started, kind of how we got to this point, what the guidelines updates usually look like, how often they happen, etc. A few moments on the actual guidelines themselves, and then a bit of time in the ARTIE system to talk about what's new there. And I want to say the webinar today, our focus really is on the changes, what is different. So this is not designed to be an introduction into every grant program, how to apply all the kinds of advice that we dispense and that Brianna and her colleagues spend time with you on. This isn't a grant writing seminar today. We're really focused just on what's different, what to look for, especially folks who've been with us before, current grantees who will recognize those changes or who are accustomed to one particular way of doing things. We think you'll especially get a lot out of today's session. And of course, we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A, and Brianna and her friends will be available later when you have more questions as they come up throughout the grant season. So lots of time for those good things. So first, just some background real quick before we get into it. As you know, if you've been with us for some time, or if it's new information, we do have these guidelines updates periodically. It's been every 2 years for at least a few cycles now. Staff presents them to the OAC board, which reviews and approves them, and then we get them into action. So that's usually a fall activity. And indeed, these guidelines that we're going to describe to you today, they're online at the moment, were approved and took effect in October, adopted by the board. Lots of different things go into those revisions, as you can imagine. First and foremost is you, your voices, our constituents, the feedback that we get from you periodically, and that includes a whole range of things. So the coordinators, Brianna and her colleagues, really act as our agency's eyes and ears. They're listening to you, talking with you on the phone and emailing and so on, maybe visiting with you in person. They bring back that feedback to us and make it a part of our process. We get a ton of your feedback through our application process and the policy discussions that happen there. So we heard directly from from panelists when it's fresh in their mind after these meetings, what sorts of really kind of granular suggestions they want to make, things to make the process clearer, pieces that could be better explained or words that could be changed, or just procedural things we could do. We actually do read your survey results, things that come into us via SurveyMonkey, the constituent satisfaction report, the final reports that you give us. We really do read all of those things and assimilate all that information, make that a part of the process as well. Of course, staff on our own are going through the system, thinking about ways to improve things, thinking about places where there is some duplication, looking around the country, talking to our colleagues in other states, et cetera, et cetera. And then lastly, an interesting thing that was different and new this year, and some of you may be familiar with this, the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, NASA, our service organization, led us through an interesting research project this year, mostly over the spring and summer, called Equity Gap. So this was an important project for us, the first in the nation that was conducted this way. NASA was interested, as were we, in how close we were coming as an agency to achieving the funding equity that we shoot for, thinking about our definitions, our assumptions, our grant making history, where the dollars go, the language that we use, just all sorts of different aspects of the way we do what we do as a grant making agency. And so interviews were conducted. Some of you may have been a part of that, some focus groups, lots of survey results, lots of data analysis, some consulting, and just a ton of recommendations that we're frankly just beginning to unpack and operationalize. So the guidelines revisions that you see begin that process. There's more to do, but that informed some of this work this year as well. And so, so what, right? So what became of all those recommendations? So here's the quick thumbnail sketch of what we were aiming for in the guidelines. First of all, of course, trying to make things simpler. Trying to make them easier to read, trying to make them a little faster to get through, plainer language, more readability, less jargon. I can't promise no jargon, but less. Any place we could find a place to take that out. We looked for places that we could streamline and eliminate duplication. So places where you only have to do something once was interesting. And we looked for those opportunities, places to clarify processes, places to sort of reduce burden, get information to you that maybe we think or assume that you know, but you don't. We heard those sorts of things through some of those research moments. So trying to address those issues. And then you'll see throughout the guidelines as you go into them, some revisions to review criteria around almost every program, not quite all, but many programs. And two important things happened there. And again, some of this stemmed from that NASA work. We wanted to increase and better focus on historically underrepresented populations in communities. So we heard from you both in your feedback throughout the year and especially last year in those quarterly surveys that some of the organizations that we issued grants to took part in. And we heard throughout the year, it was a top 3 issue priority for you all year long, working in the sort of DEI space, doing important work there. Our peers across the country are doing this work. We are as well. It's important. So we want to be sure that the focus is there. It's clearer what we're aiming for, what we think you should be thinking about. We also want to do a better job at recognizing the great DEI work that's already underway that we know you've succeeded in. Want to give panels and panelists a place to recognize that work and reward that, and then incentivize some more steps and some stretch goals and some things like that. So you'll hear Brianna talk as we get into it about criteria revisions, and that's the thrust of some of those. Major updates at a glance, sort of a twofold look here, again, just from the 35,000 foot level. We did discontinue some programs. Discontinue sounds negative, but don't worry. We also added some things. We've discontinued the Arts Access Operating Support Program, as well as the Building Cultural Diversity Project Support Program, and part of the Artists with Disabilities Access Program, the part that serves organizations only. But on the same token, we have also added new places for all those folks to go. So a new program called Arts Rise, which is for organizations, a project support program that you'll hear more about, something new for individual artists called Artist Opportunities, and then statewide arts service organizations as well is sort of a new program that Brianna will talk with you about in a moment. Also big updates if you're a sustainability grantee. You'll be hearing a bit about changes there to the timing of your application, as well as the frequency of deadlines. These are changes that we've talked about for some time, and I am excited to kind of get them in front of you finally. And I think these are going to be important and meaningful, useful, valuable updates and changes that will make our work easier. It'll make your work easier. It'll make some things easier to access, and I think be positive all the way around. So some things went away, some things in their place. Everyone should have a home still. There shouldn't be anybody who we used to fund that we really don't have a spot for anymore, but definitely some changes. Everything we'll talk about is on our website. So if you haven't been to the website lately, to the grants page, this is it, oac.ohio.gov/grants. It does look slightly different than it looked in the past, although not too different. If you're the kind of person that gets there and just has one spot that you always go to, and that's like the thing that you always do, look around a little bit more next time you visit. There are some important things there that you may want to take advantage of that you haven't in the past. A click gets you our pamphlet that sort of explains, a little trifold, takes you through all the programs, important deadlines, etc. Something to print out. Maybe we don't print too much stuff anymore, of course. The ARTIE system login and link is right there. If you're thinking about how to get there, don't have that bookmarked. If you haven't seen our grant writing tip sheet, that is there as well. There's a new glossary that didn't used to exist that uses some of our frequently used grant making terms are there. We'll be adding to that over the coming weeks and months as we go. Interesting information about being a panelist, both the nomination form as we get into that process and a handbook that describes what those panelists go through. And then of course, our grants calendar at the bottom for important dates and things to remember, et cetera, et cetera. And then at the bottom, again, if you skip straight to your program and its guidelines, you missed these 3 important things here, some of which could have important information that you need. One is just the intro and overview to the guidelines. The funding restrictions are there, lots of good blanket information that applies across the board to all programs, organizations, and individuals. And then last but not least, these 2 kind of step-by-step ARTIE instruction documents that walk you through what to expect. So if you're a new grantee, these are lots of things to explore offline when you've got some time. Folks who've been around for a bit before and haven't clicked through all those different links, think about taking a moment to do that when you get a moment, and you'll learn some more and use those resources that we're putting out there for you. Okay, there's my background to get you started. Brianna, I'm going to turn it over to you to get into some of the program by program changes.
Thank you very much, Dan, and hello to all. I am very excited to share the grant updates with you, and I'm going to walk through all the OAC grant programs so that we leave no stone unturned. But I do want to start out by reiterating that this webinar is really geared towards those who are already familiar with our grant programs and want to know what's different from previous years. It's not really going to be an introductory overview of all of our grant programs. So if you're a new applicant to the OAC and you want to get that baseline overview, I encourage you to visit the grants webpage of our website or contact an OAC staff member so that we can connect you with the appropriate program. But today we are going to be focusing on existing grantees learning about the new changes to the grant guidelines. And as Dan mentioned earlier, some programs have had major changes, others are minor, and some, believe it or not, have had no changes whatsoever. But we're going to be touching on all of it so that there's no mystery. It's a lot of ground to cover. I'm going to do my best to spend the next 20 minutes sort of walking you through them all in the order that you see listed on the right, starting with the grants for organizations in green, and then arts learning grants in purple, and then we're going to end with grants for artists. I mentioned that I was going to walk, but really I'm really going to speed walk through it all, so hang on for the ride. So with all that said, some of the biggest changes made to their guidelines were to our sustainability grant program, so it's fitting that we start here. The first change being who can apply for sustainability funding. In previous iterations of the guidelines, mid-sized and large organizations could apply through sustainability funding, and small organizations had to come in for operating support through a separate grant program called Arts Access. Well, now we have one grant program that provides operating support for all budget sizes. So this means that the Arts Access grant program no longer exists because it is being absorbed into the sustainability grant program. So if you are a current Arts Access grantee, please know it's just the name, the program name that's going away. That funding opportunity will continue through sustainability, and you'll apply as a small organization, and small organizations can request up to $10,000 through sustainability. Previously through Arts Access, the maximum request amount was $5,000. Now, in terms of, Let me advance this slide. There we go. Now, in terms of how the OAC determines small versus mid-size and versus large organizations, there hasn't really been a change in terms of the $50,000 budget threshold, but there has been a change in terms of us looking at the average of the past 3 years of financials instead of just the most recently completed financials. So to determine which category your organization belongs, you'll need to look at the average income of the last 3 fiscal years of your annual arts programming budget. And if that average is below 50,000, your organization would apply as a small organization. If that average is above $50,000, you'll come in as a mid-size organization. And the large size category is actually determined by OAC staff after we've received all the financials from all the sustainability update or all the sustainability applicants, I should say. Based on those submitted financials, we'll then request a certified audit statement and income verification form from those that are likely to be among the largest 40 organizations, and we'll use that to make the final determination. I do want to note, though, that small organizations are not required to provide financial documents or a data arts funder report as part of their sustainability application. That continues to be a requirement of only mid-size and large organizations. Small organizations will, however, still complete a budget worksheet with a request amount, just like they did in the Arts Access Grant Program. Another big change in the sustainability program is the deadline cycle. So traditionally, deadlines have occurred every 4 years because it's a 4-year grant, and the program will remain a 4-year grant. However, we will be accepting applications every 2 years. So this will allow newly eligible applicants to come in for operating support without having to wait 4 years to apply. And it'll also help us out from the administrative side of things to kind of offset the administrative workload on our end for an on-year. And then to balance the number of applicants during this transitional year, we have assigned current arts access and sustainability grantees into an assigned application schedule. So grantees assigned to the Group A schedule will need to complete a full on-year application at the upcoming February 1 deadline to reapply to the program. And then grantees that are assigned in the Group B schedule will need to complete an off-year update by April 1st. These group assignments are listed on the grants webpage of our website, and they are also hyperlinked in the sustainability grant guidelines. So if you have not done so already, be sure to check which group schedule your organization was assigned. And I should note that these were random group assignments. We have several organizations that are newly eligible to apply for sustainability funding at the upcoming deadline. So we took that into account to balance the number of applicants coming in at each deadline. If your organization does not currently receive operating support through either Arts Access or sustainability, you can come in for funding at an upcoming deadline once you have at least 2 qualifying Ohio Arts Council grants in the last 4 fiscal years. And those qualifying grants are now explicitly listed in the sustainability guidelines, which is another guidelines update that we made. So if you have the required funding history to apply, your organization can and really should apply at the upcoming February deadline. All right, so just to reiterate, if your organization has been assigned on the Group A schedule, you'll be required to submit a full on-year application at the February 1 deadline. If your organization is on the Group B schedule, you'll be getting a 2-year extension on your current sustainability funding, provided that you complete the off-year update by April 1st. And then you won't have to worry about completing another full on-year application to reapply to the program until the next open deadline, which will be in 2025. Off-year updates will continue to be required annually, as well as final reports, so no changes there. I also want to note that if you are assigned to a group schedule and you missed that deadline, or perhaps you're declined for funding, you can come in for funding at the next deadline in 2 years so that you don't have to wait another 4 years. And finally, the review criteria has been updated for this program. So you will see You'll see that update has been made to many grant programs. So I appreciate that Dan discussed those updates earlier to save me the work of sounding like a broken record. But in case you missed it, I encourage you to kind of revisit that portion of the webinar when this recording becomes available. But as a quick refresher, we've simplified the review criteria. We've tried to remove duplication and any jargon. The criteria is also prompting applicants to consider the diversity within their own community, because we know the diversity in Pike County differs from the diversity in Hamilton County, for instance. So yes, consider this diversity with respect to the organization and its participants, with a focus on historically underrepresented populations. As Dan mentioned, we know a lot of the organizations are already doing this important work and continuing to expand the ways that they're being inclusive and accessible. And I'll just wrap up this review criteria bullet by just reminding everyone that the application's narrative questions are just the review criteria posed in question form. So you'll notice the application questions have been updated to mimic the the revised criteria. And in some cases, including sustainability, some narrative prompts were eliminated because that information was provided through the budget materials, for instance. So that's just one example of our efforts to eliminate the duplication and simplify the application. All right, moving on to our second grant program. So another general operating support grant program that is a new listing is the statewide art service organization grant program. This has already existed as a pilot program with a handful of organizations, but it's being adopted as a formal grant program. The biggest change for our current statewide art service organization grantees is that they'll be required to provide data arts funder reports and financial materials such as a 990 as part of the application. The program also experienced changes to the review criteria, so I encourage those service organizations to take a take a look at those and the updated application questions. And then for those that are interested in applying to this program for the first time, there are special eligibility requirements which are listed in the guidelines. So if you think your organization is eligible, please contact your regional organizational coordinator at the Ohio Arts Council prior to starting an application. All right, now we are transitioning into the project support grant. So Art Start is one grant program where there weren't very many changes to the guidelines with the exception of the review criteria. So those changes that we've discussed earlier are applicable to this program. Feel free to revisit those portions of the webinar and the slides and check it out in the grant guidelines and the updated application narrative prompts. If you have questions, you can reach out to your regional coordinator. If your organization is based in Northeast Ohio, you'll reach out to my colleague Patrick Rohrenbeck. If you're in the Western and North Central region of the state, you'll contact Jim Sakosh. And then for those in Central and Southeast Ohio, I am your go-to. And again, let me see. All right, so again, here in the Arts Next program, you'll also see updates to the review criteria, just as we've mentioned previously, and there's a little bit more emphasis as well within the criteria around the concept of innovation that takes into account the applicant's community, as well as the impact of these groundbreaking projects within the organization and its practices. Another change is the request amount. It's increased from $20,000 up to $25,000 to support these ambitious projects that are innovating the sector or breaking the mold in terms of your organization's programming and the arts available in your community. And finally, we've arrived at another new grant program. Now, I know earlier there was a listing of the grant programs that had been discontinued, as Dan had in the slide. Building Cultural Diversity and Artists with Disabilities Access for Organizational applicants were listed there. But really, they're not discontinued or sunsetting. They're really being absorbed or folded into, and they really informed the development of this new grant program that's called Arts Rise. So if you're a current grantee or a past grantee through either of those programs, ArtsRise will continue to support that work. And ArtsRise funds a wider scope of possibilities because it also welcomes capacity building efforts that are focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Really, the common thread among these programs that continues in this new program is that it supports organizations and projects that are expanding access and inclusion of historically underrepresented populations. Applications will open March 1st, and funding will be available on a first-come, first-served basis. So applicants should submit their application no later than 90 days prior to their proposed activity date. We'll be accepting applications through November 30 or until the funds are expended. And organizations can request up to $5,000, and there's no match requirement for organizations with budgets below $100,000. The applicant must meet at least one of these two eligibility checks for funding. So one is based on who represents your organization, and the other is looking at the focus of the project. So if majority of your organization is comprised of a historically underrepresented population, your organization is eligible to apply. Or if your project is focused on advancing the equity, diversity, inclusivity, and accessibility with an historically underrepresented population, your organization is eligible to apply. So what do we mean when we talk about historically underrepresented populations? Well, this can include a lot of groups. We have a listing here that includes the BIPOC community, people with disabilities, older adults, Appalachian and rural communities, lower income communities, the LGBTQ+ community, veterans, justice impacted citizens, but this list is certainly not exhaustive, and it's not limited to what's just here. So if you have questions about this new grant program and what it can fund and the organizations it supports, just reach out to your regional grants coordinator. Okay, so we are transitioning back to a familiar grant program, capacity building, that has had a minor tweak. The program is still designed to fund projects or activities that enhance or strengthen an organization's knowledge or skills, but it has shifted to fund the outside expertise overseeing that work. So the program can fund consultant or facilitator fees or registration costs associated with attending a national conference, or perhaps training provided by a software company, but the funding will only support the expertise provider, and that provider must be outside the organization. And since the funding is going towards those outside fees, documentation from that third party is a requirement of the application. So if you've hired a consultant or are considering a consultant, you'll need to have the contract or the proposal from that consultant outlining the scope, the cost, and the timeline of that project. For those who have been capacity building applicants in the past, you'll notice that the application is much shorter. It went from 12 narrative questions down to 3, but it more heavily relies on this third-party documentation that conveys the who, the what, the when, and how much it's going to cost. And the deadlines to apply for capacity building have moved up a little bit. The first deadline will be May 1st, and the second opportunity to apply will be November 1st. All right, so the major change within the Ohio Artists on Tour program is that the staff contacts have been expanded to mirror our regional organizational coordinator. So previously, it was just me coordinating the program, and now I am very happy to be sharing it with my colleagues Jim Sakosh and Patrick Rohrenbeck. There has also been some added language to better clarify that this funding is to support performing artists' existing work. So it's not designed to support the commissioning of new work or to hire a guest artist that will be performing with the applicant's own performances. If you have questions about that, just reach out. I'm happy to clarify. Me and my colleagues are happy to clarify. And that really does it for the organizational grant program. So now we're transitioning to those that are housed within our arts learning office. Chiquita Mullensley and Jared Small are the program coordinators for these grants. They are the content experts and your go-to if you have any questions. But really, I get it an easy start off with Arts Partnership because the only updates there are in the review criteria. So be sure to look into those and the corresponding narrative prompts, especially because this year is an on year to reapply for another 2 years of Arts Partnership support. All right, Teach Arts Ohio, on the other hand, does have a few more updates than just the review criteria. There has also been an increase to the teaching artist fee. It went from $300 to $350 per day. Additionally, the minimum residency length is now 10 full days, and those days could be spread out over as many or as few weeks as the school wants, but it must be at least 10 full days. And we've also clarified some language in the guidelines around something that has always been the case, but is now just more succinctly stated. And it is that every Teach Arts Ohio grantee is required to work with their teaching artist to provide at least one professional development for all staff during the residency. And finally, a program with no changes. Schools that have applied for Big Yellow School Bus funding can anticipate what they're used to through that grant program. All right, I hope you're all hanging in there as we approach the last category of grants. These are for individual artists, and these are managed by my colleagues, Kathy Signorino and Chaz O'Neill. Individual Excellence Awards had a few minor tweaks in terms of clarifying language. There was one change for the artists that apply collaboratively. We have streamlined that application process so that you only have to submit one application instead of two. So we hope that helps save you some time. As for the Artists with Disabilities Access Program, it used to accept applications from both individual artists as well as organizational applicants. The program will continue to support applications from individual artists, but organizations are encouraged to support or to seek that support through the new Arts Rise grant program. And for the professional artists that are applying, they can now request up to $2,500, which is up from the previous level of $1,000. And emerging artists can still apply at that $500 request level. And whether you're applying as an emerging artist or a professional artist, I'm pleased to let you know that you no longer have to submit letters of support as part of your application. So that support material requirement has been eliminated. For traditional arts apprenticeship, there was just a minor tweak to the deadline. It has been pushed from March 15th to April 1st. And then lastly, as I take this little breath, we kind of cap off our guidelines updates with a new grant opportunity for artists. So we have often received inquiries about project support for artists, and here it is. Artist Opportunities supports projects and activities that support your professional growth or contribute to the vitality of your community. So these can include activities that either advance your artistic career or support expenses associated with creating or marketing your work, or support public engagements of your work like exhibitions or performances or screenings. There's a lot of possibilities through this program. Emerging artists can request $500 and professional artists can request up to $2,500. If you're unsure whether to apply as a professional or an emerging artist, our guidelines does distinguish between the two, so I encourage you to review those to assist you in how to categorize your career level. And the annual deadline to apply is May 1st. So if you have any questions about this program or about any of the funding opportunities for artists, I encourage you to get in touch with Kathy or Chaz. And look, here they are with all of the other coordinators I mentioned today. So I know I went over a lot of information, so I think it's appropriate to kind of end my part by saying that if you're unsure about anything, or if you have a question, be sure to reach out to your program coordinator or a member of our investment office who also work very closely with these grants. We're really always happy to help, and we certainly want to set you on the best path forward for available funding. So In conclusion, we hope that you find that these guideline updates are positive and responsive to the feedback we receive from you and your arts colleagues around the state. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Dan to cover the changes in ARTIE.
Thanks, Brianna. Yeah, this is that you take a deep breath. That was a lot of information. Thank you for taking us through it. And yes, this is the core of the team that did a lot of that heavy lifting and reviewing together with Donna and the rest of our staff. Yeah, hats off to these good folks and their good work to get us to this point. We're a little past our halfway point, so we still have plenty of time. Hope folks are still with us as we move into the second shorter part here of the presentation, which has to do with ARTIE. Like I said, yeah, this will be shorter, but just a few words and a quick demo to give you a look at what is different in the system as it sort of lines up with those guidelines that Brianna took you so capably through. Some updates here as well, and you'll see some familiar words in the ARTIE system. We made some updates as well, and I should say, you know, ARTIE's been around with us since 2015. Lots of little updates over the years, of course, as embellishments are added and functions are brought online and different things. But we have not really done a wholesale change of what the form looks like until this point for various reasons. So we did do I don't want to say an overhaul, but we gave it a little bit of a little more than just a fresh coat of paint this time to make some changes that you would hopefully feel and appreciate both at the applicant level and for panelists as well, and some things for the back end for staff and our team as well. So a whole range of different things there, all with, again, this focus on streamlining, on keeping things as clear as possible and making them accessible for you to get at and understand and use. So because we think they're just so dang accessible, hopefully you don't need us to walk you through it through a webinar, but we're going to do it anyway, just in case. Also, as Brianna alluded, there's a few places that we did remove some requirements. We reduced some things. There's some boxes that aren't there that you may have become accustomed to seeing. So we're excited for you to not find some things that you used to have to complete or to have a few less things to check or what have you. That'll be good. We have moved a few things around, in some cases just putting like sections of the application nearer to each other, and all of this with an eye towards helping you as the applicant tell your story a bit better and make it easier to do that. So let me see if I can toggle myself over to the ARTIE system. Hopefully it's right where I left it. And hopefully you're now seeing my white screen as I log in as anonymous user John Wilson. I'll say right here at the home screen that you know, as with everything, we got lots of changes done, but there's always something else. So we are thinking about some changes here as well to the login screen to add some functions to what's here in case you see those come online in the next few weeks or months. Don't be surprised. We're working on that a little bit more as we go. Some of you who've applied late in the spring for different reasons or coming in this year for the first time, you'll discover that we've moved some things from the application to the organizational profile, and both your organizational profile and personal profile now have to be updated in order for you to submit applications to us. And you'll find that instead of just reminders from the investment office to please go look at your profile, please complete the county, please add your house district, whatever it is that we've been missing from you, now the ARTIE system will tell you, you can't apply. You're missing some information there. You got to go put that in before the system will accept your application. So our suggestion is to go visit those places now, go put those bits of information in so that you're not caught at the last minute sending in an application and discovering that there's some missing pieces that you got to go find someplace else. That'll help us a lot and not have to contact you to find things that we need for our processes internally. Some of this will look familiar as you come into our Begin a New Application page. It looks just like it used to look. I do want to draw your attention for the many of you who I know are sustainability folks that you do see both of those groups here that Brianna talked about. So the Group A folks have a place to apply. This is the on-year folks who are applying with their full process this year, as well as new applicants who are coming into sustainability for the first time. There's also a spot for Group B. If you're a Group B person, we've identified you as such and invited you into that program and opened up the application for you. So there's nothing you need to click here. You'll find it already here and active in your open and active application page. Group A people don't have a way to accidentally wander into Group B, which is good. But Group B people, you do have the possibility of wandering accidentally into Group A because that application is open to everybody. So that includes you. So don't do that. I mean, you're welcome to look at the application if you'd like to, but if you're a Group B person, please try to save yourself the trouble of accidentally applying to Group A or spending lots lots of time filling out the application for the on-year when you're actually getting this extension and don't need to do that. So try and be sure which group you're in before you get here and don't accidentally spend time that you don't need to spend. I'm going to pretend I'm a Group A applicant for the moment and come on in to just take a look at the form. And I'm not going to spend too much time. I know we have questions that are starting to come in, so I'm not going to belabor it, but we'll give you just a quick look in case you haven't been in here yet. Of course, we ask first for your dates. I'm going to skip right past that because I don't have any important dates, but of course you'll spend a minute there to tell us when your project is happening during the upcoming fiscal year. That kind of gets you going. And the first thing that you'll notice as you come in is that we have taken your tabs away. You used to have all these tabs that you could sort of go horizontally through the program and through the form. Those have gone away in favor of this new table of contents menu on the side that jumps you up and down through the application to get from section to section. So it does look and feel a little different, but we think you'll like it once you get into it and get a feel for it. We ask for your project title, of course. And again, I'm going to point out mostly just changes here. I'm not going to spend time too much on the things that look the same. Right at the top, we notice there's a few things, just as we promised, that we've moved to a different spot. So you'll see I don't have a place to put my mission statement or my organizational history, or here's a staff board volunteer grid, and there's no place to add them. And if I roll over these handy question marks, I'm notified that these are completed in my organizational profile. They're not completed here on the assumption that your mission statement remains the same for all the different applications that you may complete with us, as well as your history, as well as your staff and board, and so on. So why make you duplicate or cut and paste? So actually, before I go any further, let me jump out and kind of show you how easy that is to do through the magic of the system. The organizational profile, I think, with the exception of those additions, looks the same, but here's where you'll find some of those pieces. And indeed, if I fill out a bit of a mission here and then save it and go back over, of course, now I'm going to my active application list, you'll see that it appears right where it should be. So hopefully that will not catch or trip up too many people, but don't be surprised when you see the mission statement needs to be completed someplace other than in the application. There it is. Also, we have put in more of these rollover, they're called tooltips, these question marks. So please avail yourself of those as often as you can. Take a look at what we've included there so you can get more details. Perhaps we'll add more as we go. We talked at length in the guidelines, Brianna and myself, about this issue of how organizations are serving and reaching out to underrepresented populations in their communities. We get panelists from all over the state and sometimes elsewhere in the country, so it wouldn't be fair of us to ask you to do heavier thinking there and provide us more details without providing panelists some information, at least, about what your community is made up of. We know that not everybody knows every part of the state as well as they would like to, and so on. And so this is just one way to help with that process. We've created some customized links that will match up with the county that you say you're located in, that take panelists and applicants straight out to the U.S. Census for some information about those different counties. And so you can get a quick look at, here's Franklin County. A thumbnail sketch, certainly not everything that there is to know about the makeup of that community, but we do get some information about population and we get some information about demographics. There's some economic information and education and so on in this link. So at least panelists have a starting point, as do applicants, at what the community looks like that they're surrounded by as they're putting together their programming and responding to some of these questions. You'll see some familiar items here, ADA compliance, where we have a different requirement of folks who are in compliance versus folks who are still working towards it. You'll see different information required of organizations that indicate that they're operating through a fiscal agent versus those who are not. The county service area looks a little different than it used to, and so on. Here's the first place that we see something that looks totally unfamiliar to you, which is this reference to sustainability small. So far, I've just said I'm applying to sustainability. Now I'm being asked to tell the system whether or not I'm a small organization. So for a moment, I'm going to say that I am. Nothing happens that you can see, but that's important later. And then again, some things that look familiar as to who you're serving. The participation section looks about the same. Again, just some slight clarifications of language, some slight, hopefully, improvements to the way these questions are phrased and how we guide you to the answers that we think you want to be providing to us. Some of the biggest changes happen in the narrative section. And again, I think it's fairly intuitive to come down, but I want to just give you a quick look at what we've done so it's as clear as possible. We still have these same list of boxes, and we still have rich text in them. We have every year a few organizations that sort of have a problem with this. So just a quick note that because we have given you all these tools to affect your font and your size and your color and so on, it means that you can make some choices that are less easy for panelists to read. So our suggestion for everybody is that whether you type in the box here or whether you cut and paste from someplace else, that you end up with a nice common black text in we're suggesting Roboto text in 14-point type, nice and readable. Feel free, of course, to bold or underline or bullet or whatever you'd like to do, but our suggestion is not to make the whole thing bold or make the whole thing 27-point type or anything else like that. You'd be surprised. We do get some unusual things that you can imagine the panelists struggle a little bit with. So readability is king there, and less is probably more. Those summaries are the same. If you haven't applied to us for a couple of years, you may not be familiar with then this short description prompt, which is just what it sounds like. We're asking you to boil down your project into literally a sentence or two, or maybe even just a partial sentence or phrase in plain understandable English that tells us what you're requesting funding to do. And we have some good examples here that hopefully give you a sense of just exactly how clear and how plain we're hoping you can be with it. We're presenting a concert series, we're offering a suite of activities, we're presenting this festival, etc. That's super helpful for us as staff. It's super helpful for panelists to get their arms around what you're doing. Our sense is you can write the larger summary here, the who, what, when, where a little bit, use those full 350 words if you'd like, and then give us the boiled down thumbnail sketch. As you get into then the 4 sections, you'll find that we've moved around the support material a bit. And again, hopefully this is pretty intuitive, but we've just moved it next to the things that it talks about. So instead of one big bucket for all your support materials, we've now got lots of separate buckets. I want to show you kind of just quickly the difference in how things look. If I'm putting in some PDFs and materials like that, I can drop them into this box here. They're going to appear both to you as the applicant and to panelists in text. So there's my volunteer bios PDF. As a panelist, I can access that and review it. It's right here alongside the other things that might have to do with my program quality, let's say. It's a bio, some of the folks who are involved. As you come down into other sections, community engagement, we're asking for different things. Maybe here is where some of the promotional materials are going to go. In the defining and measuring success section, we're talking about how your planning was carried out, what sorts of goals are involved. So this may be where your strategic plan is going to go, or some evaluation or assessment tools that you have. And then at the bottom in the resource management section, again, this is an example of a place that Brianna mentioned where we only have one prompt, although there are 3 different criteria. 2 of the criteria pertain to your budget. So we don't need you to do any more writing here. The panelists will go out and score you on the basis of how your budget section gets completed. We don't need you to write anymore. So we've effectively taken a couple of prompts, a couple of questions away, even though the points have stayed the same. So again, here we're asking, maybe you've got a deficit reduction plan. Maybe there's some board members that you want to tell us about. Things can kind of stay together. Here in the budget section, remember at the beginning of the form here, I indicated I was a small organization applying to sustainability, so I get these requirements. If I go back to the top and tell ARTIE that I am not a small, but I am a large organization, and check no here. If I go back to the budget, you'll see that I have some different requirements. I'm still asked to do the overview, but now I'm asked instead of the sort of breakout budget to do this data arts funder report and to give my audit and my 990 over. So you'll see some different things depending on your size in that section. Lastly, just want to show you the difference. Not everyone takes advantage of some of the audiovisual upload possibilities that we have in ARTIE. If you upload into some of our audiovisual media file sections, you can do some different things with the files that come in there, and panelists can see them a little bit differently. So let's pretend here I'm uploading some images that have to do with my project. Those don't come in as words, but they come in as nice little thumbnail images. If they're videos, they come in as videos, or if they're audio, they come in as audio that panelists can stream right from their machines. They can enlarge them when they get here and browse through them in this nice little grid. As an applicant, if you'd like to tell us more about what these images pertain to, you can do that here. and help panelists get a fuller picture of what you're looking at. If you'd like to give them better names, that's helpful as well. That's a nice way to kind of help tell your story so that folks are aware of, kind of what's here instead of just file names and things like that. So we'd encourage you to take full advantage of these different parts of the system, get some of your online things here, some of your AV things, I should say, here in the bottom. And then, like it says up at the top, you're asked to put those things into the different categories according to where they go. Of course, you've always got this chance to get PDFs of the application, et cetera, et cetera. That gives you a sense of what one program looks like. Let me just break quickly into one more, and then we have a few minutes for questions as well. So I'm not going to do too much, but if I go back to my begin a new application page, let me just jump into one more. Let's go into ArtStart just for a quick second and begin one of those. And you'll see right away, it looks just the same. A few differences, of course, every program is a little different than every other one. But as we jump in, you'll see right away, here's my mission statement that's already pre-populated because only have to do that once. The same thing will happen with the history and the board as those get added. And then you'll see many of the same kinds of fields here. So each individual criterion will be different for different programs. You can take a look at those differences or review them in the guidelines because, as Brianna said, the 12 criteria and the 12 prompts in the form are almost exact mirror images of each other. You won't have too much work to do as you get from one to the other, but that's where you'll find them. Here's an example of a program where we have a budget breakout that's required. That's an easy add, and there's just one certain box for that. So that'll keep it easy for you. That's about it. Again, there's hopefully most of the things that are here are going to be pretty intuitive for you. Want to be sure that folks know about those profile status changes. Sustainability folks, we want to be sure that we mention that you saw that yes and no checkbox. If you don't check either yes or no, that you're a small or large organization, you may not see all the things that you need to see to upload those files. So if you're unsure where to put things, be sure you've checked those yes or no's to get us going on that. And then you should see what you need to upload what's required of you. And get you going. But that's the long and short of the ARTIE system. I hope you have some good questions you've been jotting down. We have time to take a few of those now, and then I'm sure that we're going to get some more later, and you'll be in touch with Jim and Chaz and Chiquita and Jared and Patrick and Brianna and others, or the grants investment office team. But hopefully we answered a few of them. And I think at this point, I'm going to turn us back over to the communication staff. I think, Justin, you've been following along the Q&A, and you're going to help us moderate what we can address in our remaining time.
That's right, Dan. Thank you all for attending today. I'm Justin Nigro, the Operations and Public Affairs Director here at the Ohio Arts Council. We appreciate your time here this afternoon to learn about the changes to our grant programs. And without further ado, I'm just going to get into the Q&A. I've tried to answer a few of them as best I could, so hopefully you've got some responses already in there. Dan and Brianna, I would say one of our main questions revolves around being eligible for sustainability. What else are you eligible or not eligible to apply for in terms of other grant programs? Capacity building, ArtStart, Arts Next, lots of other options out there. Can you be eligible for sustainability and something else, or are there some that are excluded? So whoever would like to bite that one off as best they could.
I can take that one if that's all right, Dan. So if you're a sustainability grantee, really, you can apply for the statewide art service organizations, or you can't receive that funding or ArtStart funding, but you can apply for Arts Next, you can apply for capacity building, you can apply for Ohio Artists on Tour, you can apply for Arts Partnership. So there's a lot of possibilities. So really ArtStart is the main one to kind of keep in mind in terms of the project support ones.
And I'll add one additional piece there, which is there's slightly different if you're one of the large organizations, right? So if you're a top 40 organization, one of the largest in the state, we have a couple other things that aren't available to you because those grants tend to be so big. So I think Arts Rise is in that category.
As well as Arts Next. Yes, thank you for adding that, Dan.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's a good question.
Thank you. Here's a question. If you are newly eligible for sustainability, would you be considered an A or a B grouper?
Sure, I can take that one again. So you wouldn't be categorized within a particular group schedule. You should apply at any deadline that's coming up once you have that funding history. You do need to have those 2 qualifying grants within the last 4 fiscal years. So if you have that now, come in at the next deadline, which is February 1. If you're still working on that history and applying for other project support grants at this upcoming round of deadlines, we hope that you'll apply in 2025.
Thank you, Brianna. This is along those lines. A grantee wondering, or potential grantee wondering, how to determine whether to apply for sustainability or for Art Start. This would be the first year that grantee is eligible for sustainability.
Can I take that one again, Dan?
Yeah,
Sorry, I
that's
don't mean to
fine.
hog the Q&A.
No, please.
Well, first of all, congratulations on being eligible for operating support and having that funding history. I encourage all applicants, once you have that funding history, certainly come in for funding through sustainability. Because it's a 4-year grant, you don't have to do the full on-year application every 4 years. So it saves some of the administrative burden of applying every year. And you'll have, if you're gained into the program or you're approved into the program is what I meant to say, you can anticipate 4 years of operating support through the Ohio Arts Council. So if it's between the two, definitely encourage you to come in for funding through sustainability.
I'm going to stay on the sustainability theme here. We've got a few more to tick off. Is there a difference between medium and large sized organizations as it applies to requirements for sustainability grants?
Yes.
A slight difference.
Yeah,
I'm happy to if you want, Brianna. They're very, very similar between mid-size and large. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think large, we require an additional piece of financial information. I think it's the audit, and as well as what's now called the income verification form. Used to be called Form M for the old timers. A slightly different inclusion there than the mid-sized folks, which go all the way down to $50,000. So those folks, we understand, won't all necessarily have audits and so on. That's, I think, the only difference. The review is conducted slightly different. We bring out-of-state panelists in to look at those large organizations, but the criteria are the same and the points are allocated the same way. The data arts funder report is required of both groups. What else am I forgetting, Brianna?
Well, that's great, Dan. And the only addition I would make is that there is some special eligibility criteria to be considered a large organization that's listed in the guidelines. So I encourage you to take a look at that to see that very specific set of eligibility criteria.
Yeah, in the event that your budget was so large that you were otherwise in that group, but didn't, for some reason meet one of those criteria. For example, you have to have paid staff to be in the large group. So it seems unlikely you'd be one of the largest 40 organizations in the state without paid staff. But if that should happen, you wouldn't quite be eligible. You have to be an arts organization to be in that category with arts in your primary mission. So there's a few times that comes up. But yeah, it's almost exactly the same. Very, very similar.
And then looking at the other kind of division in the sustainability program, would you clarify or perhaps restate the differences between medium-sized and small-sized organizations for sustainability, whether that's requirements, budget sizes, that kind of thing?
Sure. So the difference between mid-sized and small organizations is looking at the average 3 years, the past 3 years of your financials. So if that average is below $50,000, you are considered a small organization. If that average is above $50,000, you're considered a mid-sized organization. And in terms of the application is somewhat similar. The big difference is the budget or the financial materials that's required as part of the application. So the small organizations are not required to submit a data arts funder report like the mid-sized or large organizations. They're also not required to submit a 990 like many of the other mid-sized organizations are, or whatever financials that they have. The small organizations will just complete a budget worksheet like they have through the Arts Access program, or if they're new and used to Arts Start, if that's how they got their funding, the budget section looks the same as that. It's a budget worksheet, income and expenses.
Thank you. Where the sustainability questions keep coming, I'll take a couple more and then we might move to a different grant program. I want to be respectful of your time. We may not get to every single question, but we'll do some follow-up after the webinar to make sure that we're in touch with folks who don't have their questions answered here live. So for sustainability, we have a person asking whether an organization has to have 2 grants from 2 different programs in each year over 4 years, so 8 grants total to be eligible. I think the answer is no to that one too. Dan, you're shaking your head. Would you explain that a little bit?
Right. No, yeah, correct. Just 2 grants in the past 4 years. The only caveat being they had to be grants that went through a panel process. So we can help clarify if you're not sure if your application did, but 2 in the past 4 years, starting backward from the current year 23. So we're talking about 23, 22, 21, and fiscal year 2020.
And then this is a newly eligible sustainability applicant. When selecting their program timeline and describing their work, are they expected to provide details on all 4 years in the initial application or just the next year ahead?
The latter, just the upcoming year. So in this on-year application and really in any off-year update that you provide, you're only going to talk about the year that you're requesting the funding for. So for this upcoming deadline, the grant period's July 1 of 2023 through June 30 of 2024. So that's the time frame of activities that you'll be talking about in your application.
Thank you both. So we're at 3 o'clock. We'll stay on a little bit longer to just answer a few more of these questions live, and then we'll conclude to be respectful of your time. So here's a question. Does the timing of the data arts or the CDP report change with the group A and B changes?
I don't think so, if I understand the question. I mean, the only requirement there, as folks come in, we want you to have at least 2 years in the system. So in data arts, we'd like to have at least 2 years in there. And we want to be sure that the most recently completed fiscal year is the one that we're working from. We know folks have different fiscal years in terms of whether it's calendar year or fiscal year, state fiscal year, federal fiscal year, et cetera. So the 2 most recent should be there. That can vary, but there hasn't been a change in terms of like the group A, group B. I'm not sure I get the question, but no, I don't think there's a change there.
Changing grant programs just for a moment, maybe. If you received an Arts Next grant, are you eligible to apply again? The program is supposed to be innovative and new. Can it still be considered innovative and new in a second application?
Sure, that's a great question. So there's nothing that prohibits in the guidelines from you applying for an Arts Next grant again. I encourage you to have a conversation with your regional coordinator, because one of the criteria that the panel will be looking at is to learn how your project or how your proposed activity is innovative compared to past programming. So if you're planning on applying for a continuation of a program that you've received Arts Next funding for, certainly have that conversation with your coordinator.
Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one more. And Brianna, since you are have such a long history with the Ohio Artists on Tour grant, I'm gonna toss this one your way. Can an in-house performing dance group as part of an art center be eligible for funding through an Ohio Artists on Tour grant?
An in-house. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, so an applicant cannot use their own, apply for funding to support their organization's own company's performances. So it has to be an outside group that you're presenting, that you're hosting and saying, look, community of this group, we're going to do a public performance and present them. So I hope that answered your question. If not, give us a call and I'm happy to talk more.
Thank you, Brianna. Thank you, Dan, for your time today. Again, you may have not had your questions answered yet here, but we will be sure to do some follow-up here in the days to come. And we appreciate all of your thoughtfulness in getting these to us. So with that said, Katie, I think I'm going to turn it back to you to close us out here today.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Thanks for moderating that great Q&A session. As Justin said, we were tracking all of the questions. We have your email addresses. Somebody on staff will reach out to you if we didn't get to your question in time. Thanks again to Dan and Brianna for taking the time to put this incredibly informative presentation together. I know I saw in the chat, it was much appreciated, rave reviews. So great job, guys. And a few reminders before we go today. So a recording of today's presentation will be available shortly on the OAC's webinars page at oac.ohio.gov/webinars and on our YouTube channel. And everyone who registered today will get an email containing the link to the recording and a link to Dan and Brianna's slide deck as well. And also looking ahead to 2023, we have some great webinars planned for the new year. So heads up to mark your calendars on Thursday, February 23rd. forward, our individual artist staff will offer a more in-depth look at that new Artist Opportunities Initiative that Dan and Brianna mentioned today. And then on Thursday, March 9th, we're going to partner with our friends at Art Possible Ohio to talk about the Artists with Disabilities Access Program with more of a focus on writing your application narrative. So we'll be sharing links to register for those webinars shortly after the start of the new year. So stay tuned. That is it for today. Thank you again for taking the time to tune in. Go forth and prepare those grant applications with confidence. And we will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.